In the past year, as people were forced into the comfort of their homes by the pandemic, they were welcomed in open arms by one of the most addictive pastimes of any homebody: television. Comcast reported that the average household was watching over 8 hours more every week in the midst of COVID-19's first worldwide spike, and the information gathering company Nielsen found an average increase of 61% in streaming video from your TV. And as a result, expectedly, this also drove the popularity of anime to new heights, and let it soar as one of the most popular forms of entertainment over the past year. Earlier in 2021, Attack on Titan was the most in-demand show, not just anime but actual show, airing in the entire United States. An unprecedented feat for anime thus far. But while anime as an industry soars, the workers and animators who keep said industry running behind the scenes are arguably worse off than ever before, as the gap between company profits and worker wages continues to widen. Today I'll be discussing the harsh reality of being a Japanese animator, and what it means to pursue your artistic passion in the midst of anime's most popular time across the world. In my last video, I detailed the sad truth of being a mangaka, a manga author, and though the topics are similar, I believe it would be a disservice to compare being a mangaka and an animator directly, let alone put them in the same video. Manga and anime, though connected, are two very different industries, as is the work that goes into each. Nor is either completely that bad, if it may seem that way. Being an animator means that you can work directly on something you love. Frame by frame, you can put your all into a product for the whole world to see and contribute to animation that inspired you growing up. But as with any job, but even more so with being an animator, it's necessary to weigh the cons of it all, as one of the most cutthroat industries in the world. Despite the anime industry bringing in over $21 billion in 2019, according to the Association of Japanese Animation's poll of animators, for their on-average workday of about 12 hours, a number that already shouldn't be scoffed at, 50% felt like their wages were insufficient compared to the work that they put in. In a New York Times article interviewing Tetsuya Akutsu, who's worked as a head animator on episodes of shows like Darling in the Franxx and Made in Abyss, he claimed to earn about $1,400 to $3,800 a month, or about $17,000 to $46,000 a year as a top animator. Because of how much time he has to devote daily to the job and the financial instability, he acknowledges that it's impossible to get married and to raise a child as an animator in Japan. It's almost as if you can't even have your own life. And even though a range of $17,000 to $46,000 is nothing to be scoffed at, compared to his American counterparts in animation, this pales in comparison to their average of $65,000 a year or more. And even Akutsu, as overworked and underpaid as he is frankly, one of the lucky ones. He is what this New York Times article noted as a Ganga man, the more renowned, generally freelance animators who get hired to work on key episodes or scenes, and this is contrasted by the Doga man, more common entry-level animators who work frame by frame to connect those key illustrations together, to make, well, animation. For them, that $45,000, what already seems like a low number for the amount of work he puts in, that number is only a dream to them. 27% of the animators participating in the poll about wages said that they earned less than 1 million yen, or about $10,000 annually. The average was said to be about $12,000 a year in 2019, barely a reasonable salary for any job. And this is all on top of the fact that the large majority of animators live in Tokyo, renowned as one of the most expensive cities in the world. It isn't a far stretch to say that for 1 million yen a year, living in Japan isn't an easy task. And to escape the poor salary deals, many work without contracts as freelance, but that means that they don't have company benefits like health insurance while arguably working just as hard. And some animators don't even do as well as others in other specializations as well. The most highly paid storyboard animators, for example, who draw frames to plan out the episodes, reportedly only receive 80% of other kinds of animators. But doing what you love isn't always about the money. In fact, for most artistic pursuits, money almost always takes a second or third priority. But with the amount of work that Japanese animators have to do, burnout and exhaustion are significant issues for those working towards their passions that must be taken into consideration. Another survey supports the earlier claim of an average of 12-hour workdays for animators, this one averaging out to 11. But it's not like they spend half of the entire day to work overtime so that they can, say, have less work the next day. Actually, over 50% of those surveyed had 4 or less days off in the entire month, including weekends, taking the idea of karoshi, death by overwork, to its extreme. I talked very in depth about the idea of karoshi in my video about mangakas and how they work to the bone for each and every chapter, so go and watch that video if you want to further understand the term itself. But it essentially refers to the very common culture of overwork within Japan's workforce, where stretching your body's limits for work is almost like a badge of honor rather than a significant concern. 12 plus hours of work a day for $30, not even a full weekend off at the end of the week. It can't even be considered minimum wage, really. But don't get me wrong, this isn't always forced on them. In fact, it is an inherent cultural standard in Japan to want to work for a collective purpose and devote yourself entirely for that sake. It is voluntary, and it does stem from each animator's, or each of Japan's workers really, their passion for their work. Some decide it's not worth it. Ryosuke Hirakimoto quit the industry after his first child was born, after many years of never making more than $38 a day. But most do stick with it. According to Hirakimoto, no matter how little some of them got paid, they were willing to do the work. And so there is a really important question that must be addressed, which is, why doesn't it change? Why don't conditions and wages improve? Why is animation so grueling? Well, a big aspect of the problem is that the supply of aspiring animators is relatively inelastic, meaning that companies can keep wages just about as low as they want and still receive a stable supply, if not an influx actually, of workers. Because there are so many young animators passionate about creating anime who dream of making it big and working on this art form, most costs are acceptable to them. After all, it isn't a dead-end job being an animator. Hayao Miyazaki, the famed co-founder of Studio Ghibli, and Hideaki Anno, the director of Neon Genesis Evangelion, both began as mere animators. You can become a director or supervisor, all of which do pay reasonably, though of course that doesn't necessarily mean any less work, just more reasonable pay for it. Simona Stanzani, a translator in the animation business for over 3 decades now, described this inelastic trend in more blunt terms. She said that studios have a lot of cannon fodder. They have no reason to raise wages. The excessive hours and low wages are allegedly in violation of Japanese labor laws. Japan's labor ministry said the government is aware of the problem, but had little recourse unless animators themselves filed a complaint. And such, because most are willing to put up with it, nothing really changes. Because Japan in general cultivates a work environment of avoiding direct confrontation and working your hardest no matter what, the problem persists. But that culture of keeping your head down doesn't go for everyone. In the midst of arguably MAPPA Studio's biggest and busiest year ever in 2020, heading productions of Attack on Titan Season 4 and Jujutsu Kaisen, the 2 most popular anime of the year, several accusations of insanely low wage rates from their workers arose. They claimed to have factory-like, unhealthy working conditions, working them until the sun came up. And though this problem actually seemed to be rooted in the fact that Netflix wasn't willing to pay MAPPA enough budget proportionally to the amount of work going into the projects, it doesn't change the fact that its ultimate downstream effect fell onto the workers who felt obligated to speak up. And also, not every company is some horrible machine pumping the life out of their animators if that's what it made it seem like. Kyoto Animation is known for giving employees favored salaries instead of always outsourcing to freelancers, the cheaper and more common option. And so, at the end of the day, the issue is systemic. It is built upon restrictive budgets from production committees and the Japanese culture of overwork and the almost indistinguishable passion of young animators to work on the anime they love. It's difficult to even think about the fact that a form of media that brings millions joy and entertainment rides on the back of so much exhausting work. Leave a comment on what you think. I always encourage discussion and opinions on such a controversial and difficult topic. And as always, this has been the Anime Culture Corner. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future in-depth show, manga, and character analyses.